I'm Megan Taylor, 34, an IT project manager with a peaceful three-bedroom house in Portland that I worked my butt off to buy. My life has always been about careful planning, saving, and stability, the complete opposite of my free-spirited older sister Amber. Last Tuesday, my carefully structured world imploded when my parents called with exciting news. Amber and her family had blown through $350,000 traveling the world and were coming home broke. The kicker? My parents had already promised them they could stay with me, just until they get back on their feet. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from and hit subscribe to follow this wild family drama as it unfolds. Growing up in the suburbs of Seattle, Amber and I were always like night and day. 3 years my senior, Amber was the epitome of spontaneity and creativity. She painted murals on her bedroom walls without permission, dropped out of community college to follow a band on tour, and somehow always landed on her feet, usually with my parents' help. I, meanwhile, was the responsible one who followed rules, graduated with honors, and built a life based on careful decisions. Our parents, Karen and Robert Taylor, are loving people, but there was always an unmistakable pattern. Amber's unpredictability was celebrated as living life to the fullest, while my stability was taken for granted. When Amber needed $3,000 to cover rent after quitting another job to find herself, my parents dipped into their savings without hesitation. When I needed help with a down payment on my first condo, they suggested I work a little harder and cut back on luxuries like my health insurance. I don't think they ever meant to play favorites. In their minds, Amber simply needed more support because she was special and sensitive. I was the strong one who could handle life's challenges without help. This dynamic created an unspoken expectation. Amber gets bailed out. Megan figures it out herself. After college, I secured an entry-level position at a tech company in Portland. I chose Portland because it offered good job opportunities without Seattle's astronomical housing prices, and importantly, it put about 3 hours between me and my family's drama. Over 10 years, I climbed from junior analyst to senior project manager. I lived in a cramped studio apartment for years, putting away every spare dollar until I could afford my current home, a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood that I purchased 4 years ago. Amber, meanwhile, floated from job to job, usually in creative fields that she'd abandon whenever they became too restrictive. 7 years ago, she met Justin at an art festival where she was selling handmade jewelry. He was a photographer with big dreams and an equally casual relationship with financial planning. They were married within 6 months in a lavish ceremony that my parents largely funded. Despite their erratic income, Amber and Justin somehow managed to buy a small house in Tacoma, mostly thanks to an inheritance Justin received when his grandfather passed away. Their daughter Emma was born 7 years ago, followed by Leo 2 years later. Their social media portrayed a picture-perfect creative family living their best life, but I knew the reality included regular financial crises. I'd lost count of how many times I'd received frantic calls from Amber needing money for mortgage payments, car repairs, or medical bills. For years, I complied, transferring funds with lectures about budgeting that Amber would laugh off. "Life's too short to worry about money, Megs," she'd say, as if my hard-earned savings were just an abstract concept. 3 years ago, after lending Amber $5,000 to prevent a foreclosure, money I'd been saving for a bathroom renovation, I finally drew a line. We had a massive argument where I pointed out that her free spirit was actually extremely expensive for everyone else in her life. I told her I was done enabling her, and that as a mother of 2, it was time she grew up. She didn't speak to me for 2 months, until she called as if nothing had happened, never mentioning the money or the argument. Since then, our relationship had been cordial but distant. We'd see each other at family gatherings, where my parents would fawn over Emma and Leo while subtly questioning why I, at my age, hadn't settled down yet. Apparently, my successful career, financial independence, and peaceful home weren't achievements worth celebrating without a husband and children to validate them. Last month, I received news of a potential promotion that would require relocating to my company's Seattle headquarters. The position would mean a 30% salary increase and leadership of a major new project. I was excited but hesitant. Moving back to Seattle would put me back in the orbit of family complications I deliberately distanced myself from. I decided to wait until the offer was concrete before making any decisions or informing my family. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed. Amber's increasingly extravagant Instagram posts from Thailand, New Zealand, and Bali. My mother's vague responses when I asked how Amber and Justin were affording such luxury. The lack of any mention of work or income during our occasional text exchanges. I was so focused on my own life that I failed to recognize the impending disaster headed my way. The truth was, I'd spent my entire life being the responsible counterbalance to Amber's chaos. I'd built my identity around being reliable, practical, and independent. Deep down, I harbored resentment that my stability was expected rather than appreciated, while Amber's instability was rewarded with attention and support. This dynamic had shaped our relationship for decades, but I never imagined it would lead to the crisis that was about to unfold. The call from my mother came on a Tuesday evening as I was preparing dinner after a long day of meetings. Seeing her name on my phone, I expected the usual check-in about weekend plans or updates on a distant relative's health issues. "Megan, honey, I have exciting news." My mother's voice had that particular pitch she used when she was trying to make something troubling sound positive. "What's up, Mom?" I asked, stirring the pasta sauce I'd been simmering. "Amber and Justin are coming home. They'll be back next week." "Isn't that wonderful?" Something in her tone made me stop stirring. "I thought they were traveling for another 6 months. Did something happen?" "Well, you know how these things go," she hedged. "They've had such an amazing adventure, but it's time for them to come home and get settled again." My father's voice suddenly joined the conversation. They were on speakerphone. "The kids need stability and to get back in school. It's the responsible decision." The irony of my father using the word responsible in relation to Amber and Justin wasn't lost on me. "That makes sense," I said cautiously. "So they'll be moving back into their house?" A pause. Too long of a pause. "Mom? Dad? They still have their house, right?" My mother's nervous laugh sent a chill down my spine. "Well, honey, that's actually why we're calling. They sold the house before they left. They got a great price for it too. $350,000. The wooden spoon slipped from my hand, splattering red sauce across my kitchen floor. "They what?" "It was a really smart move in this market," my father chimed in, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used when trying to justify something absurd. "And they wanted to do this trip right, not cut corners." "So where are they planning to live when they get back?" I asked, already dreading the answer. Another pause. "Well, sweetheart," my mother began, her voice honey-sweet, "that's actually why we're calling. They've had a few unexpected expenses on their journey, and they're coming home a bit financially strained." "Financially strained," I repeated flatly. "What does that mean exactly?" "They've got about $800 to their name," my father admitted. "The trip ended up costing more than they anticipated." I sat down at my kitchen table, sauce forgotten. "They blew through $350,000 in 10 months? Travel is expensive, Megan," my mother scolded, as if I were being unreasonable. "And they wanted to give Emma and Leo the experience of a lifetime. You can't put a price on that kind of education." "Actually, it seems the price was $350,000, I muttered. "The point is," my father continued, ignoring my comment, "they need a place to stay while they get back on their feet. And since you have that big house all to yourself." The realization hit me like a truck. "No, absolutely not." "Megan Catherine Taylor," my mother gasped. "They are your family." "They need some time to job hunt and save up for a rental," my father explained. "It would just be temporary." "How temporary?" I demanded. Well, you know how the rental market is these days, my mother hedged. And with 2 kids, they'll need something decent in a good school district. So, what? 6 months? A year? I pressed. However long it takes, my father said firmly. That's what family does, Megan. We help each other. I wanted to scream that this help only ever seemed to flow in Amber's direction, but I bit my tongue. Have you offered your house? I asked instead. Don't be ridiculous, my mother scoffed. Your father and I are in our 60s. We can't have 2 rambunctious children disrupting our retirement. Your house is much more suitable, and you're all alone there. The implication stung. My child-free status was often wielded as evidence that my life was somehow less meaningful, my time less valuable. I need to think about this, I said finally. What's there to think about? My father demanded. They're family. They need help. I'll call you back tomorrow, I said, ending the call before they could protest further. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by splattered sauce, trying to process what had just happened. Within 20 minutes, my phone lit up with a text from Amber. Hey sis. Palm Tree Airplane Mom said she told you we're coming home. So excited to see you. The kids miss their Auntie Megs. Can't wait to catch up on everything. We'll try not to be too much trouble, promise. Love you tons. Red heart, red heart, red heart. The casual entitlement of her message made my blood boil. No acknowledgement of the imposition, no request for help, just an assumption that I would upend my life to accommodate their irresponsibility. Attached to the message was a photo of them on a beach, all sun-kissed smiles and carefree poses. Over the next few days, the pressure intensified. My parents called repeatedly, alternating between guilt trips. Family should always come first. Megan, manipulation. I guess we raised you with different values than we thought, and outright anger. I can't believe you're being so selfish. Amber's messages continued, each one detailing their adventures while casually dropping mentions of how excited the kids were to stay with me. Not once did she acknowledge that she was asking for a massive favor or express any genuine gratitude. By Friday, my mother had enlisted my aunt and 2 cousins to call me, each recounting times when Amber had been there for them emotionally and suggesting I lacked compassion. The family grapevine was ablaze with the narrative that I, the successful sister, was refusing to help poor Amber in her time of need. The final straw came when my father called, his voice stern. We've already told them they can stay with you. It's done. They arrive Tuesday. I suggest you prepare the guest rooms. The presumption left me speechless. He'd made this decision for me without my consent, as if I were still a child under his authority rather than a 34-year-old homeowner. And Megan, he added before hanging up, try to be gracious about it. Amber's been through enough without dealing with your attitude. As I sat in my quiet, orderly home that evening, I realized with sinking certainty that this wasn't just about a temporary housing arrangement. This was the culmination of a lifelong pattern, the moment when I had to decide whether to continue in my assigned role as the reliable daughter who sacrificed her needs for others, or to finally stand up for myself. The worst part was, despite my anger, a small voice inside me wondered if they were right. Was I being selfish? Was my comfort more important than my niece and nephew having a roof over their heads? The lifetime of conditioning to put Amber's needs before my own had left deep grooves in my psyche, and breaking free of them wouldn't be easy. Despite my explicit refusal, Amber, Justin, and the kids arrived at my doorstep the following Tuesday. They pulled up in a rented minivan, looking tanned and cheerful, as if this were a planned vacation rather than an emergency housing situation. My parents' SUV arrived minutes later, packed with boxes and suitcases. Surprise! Amber called out, throwing her arms around me before I could react. She smelled of unfamiliar perfume and airplane recycled air. God, it's good to see you. The house looks amazing. Justin gave me a casual side hug. Thanks for doing this, Megan. You're a lifesaver. I stood frozen on my porch as Emma and Leo raced past me into the house, their excited voices echoing through my previously peaceful home. I didn't agree to this, I said quietly. My mother patted my arm as she struggled past with a large box. It's all going to work out just fine, honey. Family helps family. We'll get them settled and then take you all out for dinner, my father announced, unloading more boxes from his car. Our treat. I watched in stunned silence as my home was invaded. Within an hour, my guest room had been transformed into Amber and Justin's bedroom, with clothes strewn everywhere and travel souvenirs claiming every surface. My small home office, where I frequently worked late into the evening, had been converted into a bedroom for Emma and Leo, my desk shoved into a corner and partially covered with stuffed animals and toys. When I protested about my office, Amber looked genuinely confused. But you have a desk at work, right? The kids need their own space. During the dinner my parents insisted on, Amber and Justin regaled us with tales of their travels, the full moon party in Thailand, scuba diving in the Great Barrier Reef, their spiritual awakening at a retreat in Bali. Not once did they mention their financial situation or plans for the future. So, what's your plan? I finally asked during a pause in their stories. For jobs, housing, getting back on your feet? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. We're still decompressing from the journey, Justin said vaguely. We want to take a couple weeks to readjust to being back before jumping into the job search. We're thinking of starting our own business, Amber added brightly. Maybe a travel blog or consulting for families wanting to world school their kids. My mother nodded encouragingly. That sounds wonderful. So creative. And in the meantime? I pressed. What about income? Income will come, Justin said with the baseless confidence of someone who'd never worried about paying bills. The universe provides for those who are aligned with their true purpose. I bit my tongue so hard, I tasted blood. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in my living room, surrounded by the chaos that had descended upon my home in a single day. Backpacks in corners, shoes scattered by the door, unfamiliar jackets draped over my furniture. The physical manifestation of the disorder now infiltrating my carefully constructed life. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Amber and Justin showed no signs of job hunting, instead spending their days recovering from jet lag and planning local excursions with the kids. My carefully stocked pantry was raided daily. My utilities bill spiked as they took hour-long showers and left lights on constantly, and my quiet evenings were now filled with noise and activity. Emma and Leo, while adorable in small doses, were undisciplined and constantly seeking attention. They'd been homeschooled, loosely, during their travels and seemed to have no concept of indoor voices or personal boundaries. They entered my bedroom without knocking, used my expensive skincare products for experiments, and once spilled juice on my laptop, laughing it off as just an accident. My parents dropped by unannounced nearly every day, bringing treats for the children and acting as if this arrangement was a delightful family reunion rather than an imposition. They'd coo over the travel photos Amber was organizing, her only productive activity, while ignoring the mounting evidence that my home and sanity were being steadily destroyed. "Isn't this nice?" my mother said one evening as we sat amid the chaos of dinner preparations. "Everyone together like this? Your house finally feels like a home." The implication that my peaceful, orderly life had been somehow lacking cut deep. 3 weeks in, I returned from work to find my home office in complete disarray. My desk had been pushed against the wall to make room for an art corner, my files were stacked haphazardly on the floor, and my computer had been unplugged to accommodate the children's night light. "What happened here?" I demanded, finding Amber in the kitchen scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly. Oh, the kids needed more space for their activities. They were feeling cramped. "This is my office, Amber. I need it for work." She shrugged. "You can work at the dining table, can't you?" "It's just temporary, Megs. We need to keep the kids happy while they adjust." "How temporary?" I asked, the question that had been burning inside me for weeks. "How long are you planning to stay here?" Amber looked surprised by the question. "Well, we need to find jobs, save up for a deposit, find the right school district. I don't know, maybe 6 months? A year? However long it takes to get settled properly. The casual way she sentenced me to a year of this madness made something snap inside me. This isn't working, Amber. You can't just. Oh, she interrupted, her attention back on her phone. Look at this amazing shot Justin got of us in Phuket. Isn't it incredible? The lighting is just perfect. She thrust her phone at me, showing a sunset beach photo, completely dismissing my concerns. That night, I discovered another violation of my boundaries that pushed me over the edge. While using my laptop to check my bank account, I noticed unfamiliar transactions, online purchases from clothing retailers and food delivery services I never used. Further investigation revealed that Amber had somehow obtained my credit card information and had been casually using it for little things the family needed. When confronted, she seemed genuinely confused by my anger. It's just a few small purchases, Megan. We're family. I was going to tell you eventually. Why are you being so uptight about everything? As I stood there, looking at my sister's complete lack of awareness, I realized that this wasn't just about housing or money. This was about respect, boundaries, and a lifetime of enabling behavior that had created this situation. Something had to change, and it was becoming increasingly clear that it wouldn't be Amber. By the 1-month mark of their unwelcome residency, my once peaceful home had transformed into a chaotic hostel. Wet towels perpetually decorated the bathroom floor, dishes piled up despite my repeated requests for help with cleaning, and the noise level rarely dipped below what I considered a dull roar. My work performance was suffering. Without access to my home office, I was forced to set up at the dining table each evening, attempting to concentrate amid constant interruptions. Aunt Megan, can you help me with this? Megan, do you have any snacks? Hey Megs, what do you think of this logo idea for our travel brand? The most frustrating aspect was Amber and Justin's apparent lack of urgency regarding their situation. They'd half-heartedly sent out a few job applications, but spent far more time reminiscing about their travels and planning their brand strategy for a travel consulting business that existed only in their imagination. We really need to establish our online presence before we can monetize, Justin explained seriously one evening, as if he were sharing profound business wisdom rather than buzzwords. Wouldn't it make more sense to get stable jobs first, then work on your side business? I suggested. Amber looked at me with pity. That's such a conventional approach, Megs. We're trying to design a lifestyle, not just earn a paycheck. Meanwhile, my parents continued their daily visits, bringing groceries, but only the specific organic brands Amber preferred, not contributing to the overall household expenses that had nearly doubled with 4 additional people. Have you heard back about that marketing position? I asked Amber one morning as she lounged with coffee, scrolling through her phone. She waved dismissively. That company seemed too corporate. I don't think it would be the right energy for me. Right energy doesn't pay rent, I muttered. Why are you so obsessed with money? She snapped. There's more to life than financial security, you know, says the woman living rent-free in her sister's house after blowing through $350,000. I retorted. Emma looked up from her cereal. Mommy, are we poor now? No, sweetie, Amber soothed. We're just in transition. We're rich in experiences. I left for work before I could say something I'd regret in front of the children. That afternoon, I received a call from my director at work. The Seattle position I'd been considered for was officially being offered to me. It came with a substantial raise, relocation assistance, and leadership of an exciting new project. They needed my decision within 2 weeks. Under normal circumstances, I would have been thrilled. Now, I felt conflicted. Moving would solve my immediate problem with Amber, but it also felt like running away. Why should I be the one to uproot my life when they were the ones imposing? When I returned home that evening, my parents' car was in the driveway. I found them all in the living room, pizza boxes and wine bottles scattered across my coffee table. There she is, my father called out. We're celebrating. Celebrating what? I asked, setting down my laptop bag. Justin got a call back for a photo shoot, my mother announced proudly. A local restaurant wants him to take pictures for their website. That's great, I said cautiously. Is it a full-time position? Justin laughed. No, it's a one-day gig. But it's a foot in the door of the local scene. We thought we'd celebrate this win, Amber added, raising her wine glass. Positivity attracts positivity. I looked around at their impromptu party, in my home, presumably with food and wine I would be expected to pay for, and felt a surge of anger. I got a job offer today too, I said. A promotion to senior management in Seattle. 30% salary increase, relocation package, full benefits. There was a moment of silence before my mother said, "Oh, but you're not considering that, are you? You can't move right now, not with Amber and the family getting settled here." It's a huge opportunity, I countered. I'd be leading a major new project. There will be other opportunities, my father said dismissively. Family comes first. Amber looked concerned for the first time. You're not seriously thinking of moving, are you? What would we do? The question hung in the air, revealing the assumption that had underlined this entire arrangement. My life, my home, my future were all secondary to Amber's needs. I haven't decided yet, I said, grabbing an apple from the kitchen and heading toward my bedroom, the only space that remained somewhat mine, though Amber had taken to borrowing my clothes regularly. We should discuss this as a family, my mother called after me. We can talk tomorrow, I replied, closing my bedroom door firmly behind me. That weekend, my parents invited us all to dinner at their home. I assumed it was to discuss my potential move, but the topic was studiously avoided throughout the meal. Instead, the conversation centered around Amber and Justin's travels, the children's adjustment, and my parents' upcoming anniversary. It wasn't until dessert was served that my mother cleared her throat. So, we've been thinking about the living situation. I looked up, hopeful that they'd finally recognized the unfairness of the arrangement. Since Megan might be moving to Seattle, she continued, we thought it made sense for Amber and Justin to just take over her house here in Portland. I nearly choked on my cake. Excuse me. It makes perfect sense, my father chimed in. You won't need it if you're in Seattle and they need a stable home for the kids. Are you suggesting I give them my house? I asked incredulously. Not give, exactly, my mother hedged. Maybe rent to them at a family rate? Or you could keep ownership, but let them live there while you're in Seattle. A family rate, I repeated. And what would that be? Amber jumped in eagerly. We were thinking maybe $500 a month? Once we get jobs, of course. That would help us save up faster for our own place. My mortgage was $2,200 a month. This way everyone wins, Justin added. You don't have to sell, we get stability for the kids, and you have tenants you can trust. I looked around the table at their expectant faces and suddenly saw with perfect clarity the pattern that had defined my entire life. I was expected to sacrifice, to accommodate, to enable, while Amber was entitled to take, to be supported, to be rescued from her own choices. No, I said quietly. What do you mean, no? My father demanded. I mean no. I'm not giving Amber my house. I'm not subsidizing her lifestyle anymore. This pattern stops now. Megan, my mother gasped. How can you be so selfish? Selfish? I laughed humorlessly. I've spent my entire life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who bails everyone out. Meanwhile, Amber blows through hundreds of thousands of dollars on a vacation, shows up at my door expecting me to house her family indefinitely, and I'm the selfish one. We've had a few financial setbacks, Amber protested. It's not like we're taking advantage. You used my credit card without permission, I countered. You've contributed nothing to household expenses. You've taken over my office, disrupted my work, and shown zero respect for my space or privacy. What would you call it? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Look, my father said finally, his voice stern. You're in a position to help, and they need help. That's what family does. Does family also respect boundaries? I asked. Does family express gratitude? Does family make an effort to improve their situation rather than expecting endless bailouts? You've always been so judgmental, Amber said, tears welling in her eyes. Not everyone can be perfect like you, Megan. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for basic adult responsibility. The dinner devolved into tears, Amber's, accusations, my parents, and ultimately my departure before dessert was finished. As I drove home alone, I realized the conversation had solidified my decision. Not just about the house or the job, but about my role in this family dynamic. The final straw came 2 days later. I came home early from work with a migraine to find Amber and Justin in my living room with a stranger. "This is Derek," Justin introduced. "He's interested in buying some of your furniture." I stared at them in disbelief. "My furniture?" "Just the pieces you don't really use," Amber clarified quickly. "We need to raise some capital for our business idea, and Derek here is a furniture flipper." The stranger, looking increasingly uncomfortable, gestured to my antique writing desk, a piece I'd saved for months to purchase. "This has good bones. I could give you $200 for it." "Get out," I said quietly to Derek. Now, after he left, I turned to Amber and Justin. "You were going to sell my furniture?" "Without asking me?" "We were going to tell you," Amber insisted. "And split the money with you, obviously." "Obviously," I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Pack your things. All of you. You have until the end of the week to find somewhere else to live. You can't just throw us out." Justin protested. "We have kids. I'm giving you 4 days notice, which is 4 days more consideration than you've shown me. Figure it out." As they stammered and protested, I walked calmly to my bedroom, closed the door, and began researching tenant laws on my phone. I knew the confrontation wasn't over, but in that moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. The conviction that I was finally doing the right thing, not for Amber, not for my parents, but for myself. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. After Amber and Justin left to take the kids to a park, still acting as if they were on vacation rather than in a housing crisis, I sat at my dining table and created a strategic plan. First, I called a close friend, Rachel, who had been my sounding board throughout this ordeal. "They tried to sell your furniture," she gasped when I updated her. "That was apparently their business capital strategy," I confirmed. "Rachel, I need to get them out of my house, but I know they'll make it as difficult as possible." "You need to talk to a lawyer," she advised. "Even though they don't have a lease, they might have established tenancy by now." She was right. I scheduled a consultation with a tenant law attorney for that afternoon, then called my boss to formally accept the Seattle position. The relief I felt at making this decision confirmed it was the right move. Next, I contacted a real estate agent who had helped a colleague sell their home recently. "How quickly could I list my house?" I asked after explaining my situation. "In this market? We could have it listed by next week," she assured me. "And priced right, it should sell within days." "Perfect. Let's do it." The attorney confirmed what I feared. Amber and her family had established residency in my home, meaning I couldn't simply kick them out without formal eviction proceedings, which could take months. However, he added, selling the property creates a different scenario. The new owners would not be bound by any verbal agreements you made with your sister. I left his office with a clear path forward and a weight lifted from my shoulders. That evening, I meticulously documented every valuable item in my home with photographs and serial numbers, then locked important documents and irreplaceable keepsakes in a small safe I purchased on the way home. I texted my 3 most trusted friends, "Need help with a major life change. Can any of you store some boxes for a few weeks?" All 3 responded immediately with offers of help and storage space. With my support system in place, I moved to the next phase of my plan. The following day, I met with HR to finalize my relocation package. They offered temporary housing in Seattle while I looked for a permanent place, which solved another piece of the puzzle. "We'll need you to start in 3 weeks," my director informed me. "Will that be enough time to wrap things up in Portland?" More than enough, I assured her, feeling a surge of excitement despite the chaos I was navigating. That weekend, while Amber and Justin took the kids to visit my parents, I packed up my most important belongings, clothes, personal items, sentimental objects, and distributed them among my friends' homes. I arranged for a storage unit for my furniture and larger items to be moved once the house sold. The real estate agent came by to take photos and measurements, assuring me we could list the property by Wednesday. In this neighborhood, with these features, I'm expecting multiple offers, she said confidently. I scheduled movers for the following week and researched short-term rentals in Seattle as a backup plan. Everything was falling into place with a speed and efficiency that felt vindicating after weeks of having no control over my own home. When Amber and the family returned Sunday evening, I said nothing about my plans. I maintained a pleasant demeanor, even as my stomach churned with anxiety about the confrontation to come. I knew they would react badly, that my parents would be furious, that I would be cast as the villain in the family narrative once again. But for the first time in my life, I was prioritizing my own well-being over keeping the peace. Monday morning, I left for work earlier than usual, stopping to have breakfast with Rachel for moral support. "Are you ready for the fallout?" she asked as we sipped coffee. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. "The for sale sign goes up tomorrow. By this time next month, I'll be in Seattle starting a new chapter." "I'm proud of you," she said, squeezing my hand. "It's about time you put yourself first." At work, I tied up loose ends, prepared handover documents for my projects, and informed close colleagues about my impending move. Their congratulations and well wishes reinforced that I was making the right choice. That evening, I came home to find a note from Amber saying they'd gone to dinner with my parents and would be back late. I used the time alone to finalize details with the movers and confirm the listing details with my agent. As I looked around my house, the home I had worked so hard for, I felt a mixture of sadness and determination. I wasn't just leaving a property, I was breaking a pattern that had defined my entire life. It was terrifying but also exhilarating. The real estate listing went live online that night, and the for sale sign was scheduled for installation the next morning. The confrontation was inevitable now, but I was ready. For the first time in this ordeal, perhaps for the first time in my relationship with my family, I was completely certain of my course of action and prepared to stand my ground. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Had a lovely dinner with Amber and the kids. So nice to see them settling in. Hope you're not still upset about our discussion." I didn't respond. Tomorrow, they would all understand exactly how upset I was, and for once, I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself. The for sale sign went up at 9 a.m. By 9:17, my phone was exploding with calls and texts, first from Amber, then from my parents, and finally from extended family members who had somehow already been informed of my betrayal. I silenced my phone and focused on my work, knowing the real confrontation would happen when I returned home. All day, the notifications piled up, but I maintained my resolve. This was no longer a negotiation, it was an exit strategy. When I pulled into my driveway that evening, both my parents' and Amber's vehicles were there, along with my aunt's car. They had assembled a family intervention. Taking a deep breath, I walked in with my head high. "What the hell is this?" Amber demanded the moment I stepped through the door, gesturing wildly toward the window where the for sale sign was visible from the living room. "I'm selling my house and moving to Seattle for my new position," I stated calmly. "I've accepted the promotion." "Without discussing it with us?" my father thundered. "After we explicitly told you that wasn't an option right now?" The phrase "told you" ignited something in me. "You don't get to tell me what to do with my life or my property, Dad. I'm 34 years old, not 14. But what about us?" Amber cried, tears already streaming down her face. "Where are we supposed to go?" "That's a question you should have asked before selling your own house to travel the world," I replied evenly. "But to answer it, you have exactly 2 weeks to find alternative accommodation before the moving trucks arrive." 2 weeks. Justin sputtered. "That's impossible. We need time to save up, find jobs. You've had a month already with zero progress on either front, I pointed out. And legally, I could give you just 3 days' notice since you have no lease. I'm being generous with 2 weeks. My mother stepped forward, her face a mask of disappointment that had been effective at controlling me since childhood. I cannot believe the daughter I raised would throw her own sister and her children out on the street. What has happened to you, Megan? What's happened is that I've finally recognized my worth, I replied. I've spent my entire life being the responsible one, the backup plan, the safety net. No more. Amber made her choices, and now she gets to experience the consequences. You've always been jealous of me, Amber accused, shifting tactics. You're punishing me because my life has been more exciting and fulfilling than yours. I laughed, genuinely amused by her perspective. Exciting? Yes. Fulfilling? Debatable. Sustainable? Clearly not. I'm not jealous, Amber. I'm exhausted. Exhausted from watching you make the same impulsive decisions over and over while everyone rushes to shield you from the fallout. My aunt, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Megan, surely there's a compromise here. What if they contribute rent while you're in Seattle? You could keep the house as an investment property. I've made my decision, I said firmly. The house is already listed, and based on my agent's assessment, it will likely sell within days. This isn't a negotiation. You can't do this to us. Justin shouted, his face reddening. We have rights. Actually, I've consulted with an attorney. While you do have certain rights as established tenants, those don't extend to preventing the sale of the property. And once new owners take possession, any verbal agreement you had with me becomes void. The room fell silent as they absorbed this information. I had done my homework, and they knew it. So, that's it, my father finally said. You're just abandoning your family when they need you most? I'm prioritizing my career and my well-being, I corrected. Something I should have done years ago. And if we're talking about abandonment, where were you all when I needed help with the down payment on this house? When I was working 60-hour weeks to afford it? When I was building my career without family support? That was different, my mother protested weakly. You've always been so independent. Independent by necessity, not by choice, I replied. And now I'm making an independent choice to move forward with my life. Where are we supposed to go? Amber asked again, her voice smaller now. That's not my problem to solve, I said, then softened slightly. But if you want my advice, get jobs, any jobs, immediately. Look for a short-term rental or extended stay hotel while you save up for something permanent. Sell some of your travel souvenirs if you need quick cash. And perhaps ask mom and dad for help since they seem so concerned. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. They had been generous with emotional support and small gifts, but housing 4 additional people was clearly not something they were willing to consider. I'll help you look for jobs, I added, extending an olive branch. I'll even give you a reference if appropriate. But I won't continue enabling the situation. The conversation devolved from there, Amber cycling between tears, accusations, and desperate bargaining, my parents alternating between guilt trips and appeals to family loyalty, Justin making vague legal threats he couldn't back up. Through it all, I maintained my position calmly but firmly. By the time they left, my parents storming out, Amber sobbing dramatically, I was emotionally drained but resolute. The hardest part was seeing Emma and Leo's confused faces as they were ushered out to get ice cream during the heated argument. They were innocent in all this, and I made a mental note to explain things to them in an age-appropriate way before I left. The next few days brought continued pressure. My extended family called with concerns. Old family friends reached out to mediate. My parents attempted to rally support through our church community, painting me as heartless and greedy. Through it all, I focused on my exit plan. The house received multiple offers within 48 hours of listing, and I accepted one for $30,000 above asking price with a 30-day closing, perfect timing for my move to Seattle. A week after the listing went up, Amber approached me with a change in attitude. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, uncharacteristically subdued. About getting any job right away. And? I prompted, cautiously hopeful. I applied at 3 places yesterday. Justin too. Nothing exciting, retail, coffee shop, that kind of thing. But it's something that's good, Amber. Really good. I'm still angry with you, she admitted. But I'm trying to understand your perspective. We did put you in an impossible position. It was the closest thing to accountability I'd ever heard from her. I appreciate that. And despite what everyone thinks, I do care about you and the kids. I just can't sacrifice my life to fix your situation. Mom and Dad offered to let us stay with them while we save up, she said, surprising me. It'll be cramped, but it's temporary. I nodded, feeling a small weight lift from my shoulders. That's a good solution. 2 days later, my parents requested a family meeting. I agreed, with the stipulation that it would be at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant, rather than at anyone's home. When we gathered, the atmosphere was tense but less hostile than our previous encounter. My father cleared his throat and spoke first. Megan, your mother and I have been doing some reflecting, he began stiffly. While we still think your timing could have been better, we recognize that we've put an unfair burden on you throughout this situation. My mother nodded. We've offered to host Amber and her family until they can get back on their feet. It's going to be an adjustment, but as we've been telling you, family helps family. I bit back a comment about the convenient timing of this realization, instead saying simply, I think that's a good solution for everyone. We've also been thinking about patterns in our family, my father continued, surprising me. Perhaps we haven't been as equitable in our support over the years as we should have been. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more self-awareness than I'd ever expected from him. Amber has something she'd like to say as well, my mother prompted. My sister looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. I've been selfish, she said plainly. Not just with this housing situation, but for years. I've taken your help for granted, expected you to bail me out, and never really acknowledged everything you've done for me. I felt tears prick at my eyes, unexpected emotion welling up at finally hearing the words I'd needed for so long. I'm not promising I'll change overnight, she continued. But I'm trying to see things differently. Justin and I both have job interviews lined up, and we're looking at financial counseling to figure out how to manage better in the future. That means a lot to me, I said honestly. And I want you to know that me setting boundaries doesn't mean I don't love you. It's actually the opposite. I believe you're capable of more than this cycle we've been stuck in. The conversation wasn't a magical fix for decades of dysfunctional family dynamics, but it was a start. By the end of the meeting, we had established a timeline for Amber's family to move to my parents' home, and I had offered to help the kids transition with regular video calls after my move. As we were leaving, my father pulled me aside. I'm proud of you, Megan, he said gruffly, for standing your ground and for this Seattle opportunity. You've always been the strong one, but perhaps we leaned on that strength too much. It wasn't everything, but it was something. A crack in the foundation of our family patterns that might, with time and continued effort, lead to healthier relationships for all of us. 3 weeks later, I stood in my new apartment in Seattle, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The house in Portland had sold quickly, providing me with additional funds to establish myself comfortably in the more expensive Seattle market. My new position had started promisingly, with my boss already impressed by the transitional work I'd done before arriving. Amber, Justin, and the kids had moved in with my parents, an arrangement that was predictably causing friction, but also forcing some long overdue growth. Justin had secured a position at a printing company, while Amber was working part-time at a boutique and taking online classes in digital marketing, a practical application of her creative interests. The first month of separation had been tense, with minimal communication beyond necessary logistics. My parents sent stilted text messages, clearly torn between lingering disapproval of my abandonment and reluctant recognition that I had made the right decision for myself. Emma and Leo were the easiest to maintain relationships with. Our weekly video calls were filled with their excited updates about school and friends, untainted by the adult complexities surrounding the situation. As the weeks passed, the raw edges of the conflict began to soften. My mother called one evening with genuine interest in my new job and apartment. My father sent an email with information about a jazz club in Seattle he thought I might enjoy, a small but meaningful olive branch. 2 months after my move, Amber called unexpectedly. "I owe you an apology," she said without preamble. "A real one, not the half-hearted acknowledgement I gave before you left." "I'm listening," I replied, settling onto my couch. "I've been seeing a therapist," she continued. "Part of my work is recognizing patterns and taking accountability. And the pattern with us has been me taking and you giving, for our entire lives." "That's accurate," I agreed, touched by her insight, but cautious about another temporary change. "I don't expect one conversation to fix everything," she said, seeming to read my thoughts. "But I wanted you to know that I'm really trying to understand how my choices have affected you and others. And I'm grateful for everything you've done for us, even when I acted entitled to it." We talked for over an hour, more honestly than we had in years. She shared her struggles with impulse control and her realization that her free spirit identity had become an excuse for irresponsibility. I opened up about my resentment and the pressure I'd felt to always be the family backstop. It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a beginning. 6 months after my move, my parents invited me home for Thanksgiving. I agreed with some trepidation, unsure what to expect from our first in-person gathering since the conflict. When I arrived, I was surprised to find Amber and Justin in a small apartment of their own, modest but clean and organized. Both were working full-time, and the children were thriving in their new school. They weren't financially secure yet, but they were making genuine progress. The Thanksgiving dinner was different from any family gathering I could remember. There was an undercurrent of newfound respect in how my parents interacted with me, asking thoughtful questions about my work and life in Seattle. When I shared news about leading a major project, they celebrated my achievement without immediately pivoting to Amber's latest news. Most tellingly, when Amber mentioned struggling to cover an unexpected car repair bill, my father suggested a payment plan with the mechanic rather than immediately offering to pay it or looking to me for a solution. After dinner, Amber pulled me aside. "Justin and I are putting together our budget for next year," she said. "I was wondering if you'd look it over? You've always been good with money, and I could use the advice." The request, for knowledge rather than funds, represented a fundamental shift in our dynamic. "I'd be happy to," I replied, genuinely pleased by her initiative. Later that evening, as we sat in my parents' living room with coffee, my mother addressed the elephant in the room. "I want to acknowledge something," she said, setting down her cup. "Your father and I have favored Amber throughout your lives. We didn't see it then, but looking back, it's clear." My father nodded soberly. "We thought she needed more support because she was less conventional. But in doing so, we failed to recognize and celebrate your strengths and achievements, Megan. And we put unfair pressure on you to always be the responsible one," my mother added. "I'm sorry for that." The acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes, validation of feelings I'd carried silently for decades. "I'm not perfect either," I admitted. "I've held onto resentment for a long time, and sometimes I've been judgmental of Amber's choices rather than supportive of her finding her own path." Amber reached over and squeezed my hand. "We're all works in progress." In the months that followed, our family continued this cautious reconstruction. There were setbacks, old patterns emerging in moments of stress, unintentional favoritism surfacing in my parents' behavior, my own reflexive judgment of choices different from mine. But there was also a new awareness, a willingness to acknowledge these patterns and work to change them. 1 year after the crisis that had forced this reckoning, I returned to Portland for a weekend visit. Instead of staying with my parents, I stayed with Amber and Justin in their apartment, now decorated with framed photos of their world travels alongside evidence of their more grounded present life. When Amber mentioned struggling with a work project, I offered guidance instead of financial support. When she asked about my recent promotion, she listened with genuine interest rather than competitive comparison. The most profound moment came when Emma proudly showed me her savings jar. "I'm saving up for a camera," she explained. "Dad says if I save half, he'll help with the rest." I'm learning financial responsibility, like Aunt Megan. The phrase "like Aunt Megan," spoken with admiration rather than as a criticism, represented everything that had changed. That evening, as Amber and I sat on her small balcony after the children were in bed, she asked, "Do you think we'll ever be completely past all this?" I considered the question carefully. "I think we'll always be influenced by our history," I replied honestly. "But we're writing a new chapter now with better awareness and healthier boundaries. That's what matters." She nodded thoughtfully. "I used to think boundaries were walls that kept people apart. Now I understand they're more like garden fences. They define the space, but still allow connection to flourish." "That's beautifully put," I said, surprised and moved by her insight. "I had a good teacher," she replied with a smile. As I flew back to Seattle the next day, I reflected on the journey of the past year. What had begun as a crisis had transformed into an opportunity for growth, painful but necessary. By refusing to continue our dysfunctional pattern, I had ultimately helped not just myself, but my entire family begin a healthier way of relating to one another. The story wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more moments of falling back into old habits, more work to be done. But for perhaps the first time in my life, I felt truly seen and valued by my family for exactly who I was, not just for what I could provide or how I could solve problems. And that, more than any promotion or property, was the real achievement. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. How did you handle the situation, and what was the outcome? Don't forget to like this video if you found my story relatable, subscribe for more real-life family drama with honest lessons, and share with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and yourself is to set clear boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you navigate your own family relationships with greater clarity and self-respect.